Hello, everyone. My name is Al, the owner of Academic Composition. I'm here with Mary. She is a distinguished teacher with a wealth of experience in tutoring and teaching. Mary, great to have you with us again. And one question that a lot of our clients have is, do you really care if your students do this? I mean, sometimes there's a student who can't write anything and they turn in a great paper. And what are you going to do when that happens?
Well, honestly, most teachers and instructors have huge caseloads, and they really just don't have the time to look into or investigate that. Um, I know a lot of teachers that have they essentially, if something is turned in, they just check a box and they're good to go. So it ends up being a time factor.
Mhm.
So they simply just don't have the time to look into it too much. Um, And likewise, when it comes to tutoring, so if you, for example, don't understand a concept, my background is math and science, and so uh, a lot of clients of mine have come in just crying because they don't understand it, and they just need somebody to sit down with them for a few sessions to get over the concepts, and then they're good to go. And professors don't always have that time to do those 2 to 3 hour long sessions where they can walk them through a certain concept.
And sometimes there time comes to a student who is obviously not getting it. No matter how much you tutor them, they're just not cut out for this. Does it often happen that they want to take that extra step that goes beyond tutoring? How often do you see that happen?
The step that I've seen beyond tutoring in my professional experience is so they'll send me a sample of their work, and that's where I can put in suggestions. And so I do like the proofreading or editing, and just say, hey, try this phrase here, or even just letting them know that the little blue line under the word means that they just click on it and
Mhm.
it'll. So just basic Word document um, editing that students aren't always aware of, depending on their background in education and their formal training with writing. And so the editing piece, I know that that's usually the next step that I get with clients is they just want me to check their work, see where they're making mistakes,
Mhm.
and offer suggestions of ways to improve it or ways to get around it so that
Mhm.
they can continue to move forward with their education.
Mhm.
Um, and I believe that Keith and you are going to have more expertise on what the next step is after that if they're just not getting it.
Well, Keith, as a professor yourself, you have a lot of experience dealing with students who have no business being in college, frankly speaking. Yet they're being pushed into it. They need that to get a promotion. Frankly, a lot of them have told you that they feel like losers if they don't get their college degree, but they're not losers. See, not everybody is an academic person. Not everybody is meant to be a professor like you. So what do you do when you get a student who's just not an academic person, but they need to pass your class somehow? What's the next step?
Well, it depends on what kind of problems they're having. Um, the kind of stuff that I typically teach are in the fields of the social sciences. So it's not like I'm dealing with more precise disciplines like mathematics and the hard sciences. So tutoring and things like that would work a little bit differently. But I've often found it helpful to provide students with resources that have summaries of the key points. For example, if they've been reading the textbook and they don't understand the textbook, now I'll refer them to sources, sometimes online sources, sometimes other things that provide an explanation of the same ideas in a fairly more concise way and in a way that's more direct. For instance, one thing that I use as a supplement to the textbook is a video series that's on YouTube called Crash Course. And Crash Course is presents a lot of the same ideas that you find in basic, either for either advanced high school or early undergraduate courses. And it explains a lot of that material in a way that's more direct and to the point, and it's also somewhat entertaining. It's almost like it's not on the level of a student I had once that wondered why we couldn't use cartoons as an instructional tool, but it is somewhat more, I wouldn't say entertainment oriented, but it's less formal in its presentation.
I guess what I'm asking is, at what point do you start finding a conflict of interest between the student's professor and being their academic writer? Has it ever come to the point where you think that some of your students are just better off coming to us at academic composition instead of trudging their way through course content that serves them in no way at all?
Well, given the work that I'm in, I wouldn't say it's so much a conflict of interest. It is professional. There are professional limitations on what kind of recommendations I can make. But no, I mean, if a student needs help with writing, they need help with writing. I mean, in schools and colleges today, you have writing centers a lot of times that will help students out if they have difficulty writing, and a lot of students do. I mean, writing is like drawing or music or something like that. Not everybody's good at it. And some students really do need help with writing. That's why you have writing centers now. You also have in colleges, you have tutoring centers that help students out with certain things. Usually you have a student that's struggling with a math class and they have more advanced students that work as tutors and that kind of thing. So writing assistance is no different than that.
Well, now, John, in your experience, so what do you normally tell people when they come to you wondering, what am I going to do? My professor is going to know that I didn't write this paper. And what are their odds of actually having this problem in this day and age? John, can you hear me? Oh, wait,
I don't know if it was me cutting out or you there at the end, but the odds of anything going wrong are very, very slim. Probably 1 in 1,000 chance. Because like Keith was saying, they have writing centers now, and some professors even mandate that. They say, oh, I need you to go to the writing center during this week one time and show evidence you have. Okay. So now you're almost mandating tutoring. So any form of tutoring they find is now considered almost acceptable. We're tutors, even though we're doing the writing, we're still fulfilling their instructions the same as if they went to a writing center and said, oh man, I don't know how to build this paragraph. And the tutor in there is going to say, okay, let's go sentence by sentence and build this paragraph. Well, they're doing the same thing over here. So the chances of a professor coming to them and saying, oh, I don't think you actually wrote this all by yourself, or 1 in 1,000. And even if they did, all the student would say is, well, I got some help. I used some tutoring, and the professors now not only oblige that, but they say, well, that's good, because that shows you're giving an effort. Now, there are some variables with it as far as paying for a service that might go beyond that, but for that ever to come up is very, very, very rare.
Yeah, in fact, I remember back in 2013, I had a client who was a professional boxer, and obviously not an academic person. By his own admission, he writes in the 7th grade level, although, of course, he'd like to believe that he speaks much more articulately than that. And I'd give him that. He was way behind on his master's thesis. I did it all for him, and his advisor was astonished at how quickly he caught up. His advisor was making fun of him, saying he was down and out, using boxing metaphors. And my client hasn't even missed a beat. Oh, I have a great tutor, he exclaimed, and the professor just laughed. Of course, the professor knew what was probably going on, but did he care to investigate that? And come on now, this is a master's level student. If he got away with it at a traditional university, not a degree mill, what are the odds of some student at University of Phoenix or some Ashford style degree mill getting in trouble with this, or even at a 4-year school? Who in their right mind is really going to worry about that?
Honestly, I think they just check for plagiarism and that's it. And so if it's written by a human being, I can't imagine that it's going to be caught. And like I said before, people don't have time to investigate that.
And what's plagiarism anyway? In the eyes of the law, that's claiming credit for something that somebody else wrote without their authorization. But in this case, isn't there an implied consent that the student is authorized to use their writing? Who is going to debate the nitty-gritty legalese of this? And besides, what law are we breaking? What ethical standards breached? Who actually cares outside of the walls of the ivory tower?
I think the idea of giving credit where credit is due, plagiarism in my mind is just copying straight from a textbook. That's the only way I would measure plagiarism as a teacher. So anything past that without the quotation marks or the citation, to me, is not plagiarism.
Keith, what's your take on that as a sociologist?
Yeah, well, as far as the question of, the student being liable for plagiarism, as was pointed out, the only real guide that instructors have for that is this software like Turnitin. If you run it through Turnitin and it comes back as a match, then there'll be questions about, well, where did this come from? Some schools use Turnitin automatically just as part of their operational process. Some don't. And then some instructors will use that on their own initiative and others won't. I don't. Generally speaking, though, most professors nowadays are not sticklers for things like so-called plagiarism, for the simple reason that it's just simply time consuming to have to deal with that. Because if you want to accuse a student of plagiarism, you've got to document your evidence and go through a process, and go talk to a dean, and there's a whole process you go through. You don't just say, well, you plagiarized it. And most professors don't want to be bothered with that. For one thing, you don't get paid extra for that, so there's no incentive for it. Unless you're somebody that just wants to screw with the student or something. Now, as far as the standards of plagiarism, different schools will have their own in-house definitions of what plagiarism is. So that can vary. Legally, plagiarism just simply means copyright violations, basically. Like, you can't take something out of a book that somebody else wrote and has a copyright to and put it in your own book and publish it and claim it's your own work. Then you can be sued for a copyright violation. But there's nothing like that in academia. And as Mary said, plagiarism is typically when you do things like cut and paste articles off the internet onto a Word doc and turn it in as your paper, or you borrow your friend's paper from last semester and turn that in as your original work. And I've seen students do all this, by the way. But I mean, what we do at academic composition is more akin to a ghost writer or a speech writer. You'll be surprised at how many celebrities who have books never wrote a single word of that book. Often what they do is they just hire somebody that say, okay, I got a book I want to write. This is what I want in it. And this is how I want it to be structured. This is how I want it to sound. This is the audience I'm going for. And then it's up to the ghostwriter to write the book. And that's exactly what we do at academic composition. The same is true with speech writing. Like right now, one of the political parties is having their convention, and all of their political figures are giving speeches. I guarantee you 90+% of them did not write their own speech. Most of them are just reading off a speech off a teleprompter that somebody else wrote for them. I mean, they may give instructions. They may say, I want to say this, and this is the constituency I'm trying to reach, and all of that. But very few of those people write their own speeches as well. And it doesn't work any differently in academia. That's what we do. We're like ghostwriters and speechwriters. It's just an academic version of that. Even a lot of clerics don't write their own sermons. You'd be surprised at how many priests and pastors are deriving the sermons they deliver on Sunday morning from some other source.
Now, Mary, you've made the argument that formal education best prepares students for a life of public service. And who epitomizes the life of a public servant and a politician? Now, if they can't be held to the standards of academic integrity, who on earth can be? Well, what are we even talking about when we're talking about the possibility of a student getting disciplined? For what? Who's the victim? Where is the wrongdoing here?
Well, I mean, we could get into a whole other debate on victimless crimes. That'll be for another day.
Is that even a crime? I don't think it's even a crime.
It's not. It's not actually a crime. Like Keith said, any of the policies that are set forth by universities or schools, it's just a policy. There's no law attached to it. And they have to make a very, very strong case. The schools have to make a very strong case if there was ever anything regarding academic dishonesty. Kind of like Keith said, the professors, the teachers, they have to make a very strong case in order for it to go through. And usually the student wins out. It's almost always in the favor of the student. So there's really no incentive to not use the service. I was going to make the note that you guys were talking about writing centers and tutoring centers on campus. Just a note on those, they're staffed by students and it's based on whenever the work study students are available. They're not always available. They don't always offer tutoring and writing services for specific classes. So just know that those things are not always available. So your professor might recommend the writing center, but you have no access to it because it's just not open. I do happen to know that academic composition is open 24/7.
24/7, that's right. Google us. You'll see that we operate all around the clock. John, have you ever met a client who got busted for plagiarism after having used a service like ours? I know you talked a lot about how some of your clients are your friends going back years. Any stories of this nature?
I've had students busted for plagiarism, not from us, but because they panicked last second and instead of using a service, they just submitted something, copied and pasted from Wikipedia or whatnot. I've known some that have actually faced severe discipline, meaning they got kicked out of school because they were just so nonchalant about using something that was easily searched on the internet. And with Turnitin and SafeAssign, that's how they detect what they call plagiarism now. It's no longer just taking someone else's work. Now it's, did you replicate something else? Because there's going to be thousands of papers now on any subject that Turnitin's going to pick up. So plagiarism has moved from copying another source and rewording it, which now they encourage, by the way, because they tell you these are the only sources you can use. Don't use outside sources. This is becoming the trend. So now you have 4 random PDF documents from the 1940s, and they say this is all you can use. Okay. So now you have to reword this in your own words. Okay. So you're actually telling them to kind of plagiarize because they're not coming up with new ideas. They're just rewording stuff in their own ideas. So the only definition of plagiarism really that sticks is the Turnitin or SafeAssign score. So as long as they're avoiding that, they're fine. If they're not avoiding that, though, yeah, I've seen situations where they take it very seriously and the student comes in crying and saying, oh, my life is over. I'm about to get kicked out of school. Help me. And at that point, they want a letter explaining what they did wrong and why they did it and why they'll never do it again, which we can also do. But if they would have just came to us in the beginning, we could have avoided this whole mess.
Yeah. In fact, I've seen this before years ago. students are grilled by their professors, and then we just tell them it's really simple that the ball is not in your court. It's in the professor's court. The onus is on them to prove that you've done something wrong. So the less you talk, the better. Don't give them anything to work with, and this whole case against you is just going to wither away. But John, is it really that simple? Just keep your mouth shut, and you'll be fine. And there is really nothing to do.
Well, it depends what stage you're at. At another company, we actually had a professor that acted as a writer so they could get on the board, meaning the board where the orders were posted, and watch them and see if anyone from her class used that service because she had a very specific prompt. And turns out a student did. So now she went to the student and said, I know what you did because I have a screenshot. Well, it was obvious that she was posing as a writer, undetected, and just monitoring. But my point with this is you have teachers that are usually at a low-level university or online institution, or even a brick and mortar traditional, where they think they're being very much underutilized and underpaid, and they're pissed. So they're going to take it out on the students and do whatever they can to get you in trouble because they think they should be at Rice or Texas A&M, and they're at San Diego State. No offense to San Diego State, that's my school. But I've seen this with many professors there that come from George Washington or Rice, and they're pissed off, they're angry. They spend 50 minutes in lecture just telling everyone how much smarter they are than every other teacher at this school. They take it out on the students. They're the ones that yell at you if you're not paying attention in class, when no one pays attention in class in college. So they look for whatever way they can to get you in trouble. So if you have teachers like this, you're going to get in trouble if you try to go a different path. If you do plagiarize, according to that, is to just not do it. Just let a professional handle the work if you can't handle it yourself.
Yeah, so really the worst thing you can do is go at it alone, especially if you don't know what an in-text citation is, if you don't know what APA format is, if you don't know what to cite, what to quote, how to document it, how to cover your tracks. Just let us do it, because we have nearly 2 decades of experience dealing with all this.
Would it be wise also to say, ask your professor for the writing center, and then that does kind of cover your tracks because you are asking for resources, whether or not they're available?
Mm-hmm. Well, it makes you seem more diligent. It makes you seem like you're taking your class seriously. And as John says, some professors are bitter, vindictive, and out to create trouble for students whom they see as being disrespectful. But if you're not one of these students, if you're a student who acts like they care about the class, well, your odds of getting this professor's bad side are going to be lower. All right, guys, thanks so much. We'll be back here again next week. Check out our website at www.academiccomposition.com. Email us at academiccomposition@gmail.com. The fall semester is just starting. It's right around the corner. And follow our channel. We'll be right here with you.